So I have spent the last several years of my life as a student practitioner of creativity in the marketplace, and I've primarily been obsessed with one question, and that question is it possible to be prolific, to be brilliant, and to be healthy all at the same time, right? And what I've discovered, I'm going to share with you today, I compiled in my book, and I've discovered that it's really easy to get two of these three things right. For example, we can be prolific, meaning we're doing a lot of work. We can be brilliant, meaning we're doing good work, but miss on the sustainability piece, miss on the healthy piece. And this is where many of us live our lives as creatives, as those who turn our thoughts into value. And there's a technical term that I coined for this, and it's fried. These are the walking zombies that haunt the hallways of our organization, and this is not going to serve us over the long term. This is not where we want to be. Of course, it's easy to be healthy, meaning, hey, pace of life is great. And to be brilliant, meaning we're actually doing good work, but we're not prolific enough to meet marketplace demand. And this isn't going to work for us either. And there's a term for this, it's unreliable, because we can't be depended upon to produce at a high rate. And of course, the final combination, we could be prolific, meaning, hey, we're doing a lot of work, and healthy, meaning, hey, pace of life is great, but our work is terrible, right? And there's also a technical term for this, and it's fired. Because we're not going to keep our job if we're not producing consistently great work. So my first question for you today is this: how are you doing on this equation of prolific, brilliant, and healthy? Are you firing on all cylinders, or are you missing maybe one or more pieces? And if you say you're missing one, I would suspect it's probably the healthy piece. It's probably the sustainability piece. And you're not alone. As a matter of fact, recent research shows that up to 80% of people regularly report feeling frustrated, disengaged, and underutilized in their day-to-day work. Why is this? Why is it so difficult for us to stay engaged and to do our best work as those who turn our thoughts into value? I think there are a couple of reasons. The first is this giant nebulous question around what is creativity. I think for many of us, creativity is this mystical, elusive force that sits somewhere between prayer and the US tax code on the ambiguity scale, right? And every once in a while we have these brilliant thoughts, but we have no idea how it happened. But then combine that with the fact that we now exist in what could only be called a create-on-demand world, meaning not only are we accountable for having ideas on a regular basis, but we also have to do it by tomorrow at noon, on time, on budget, in order to keep our job. Thank you very much, right? We live in a create-on-demand world, and this creates a unique set of pressures for those of us who turn our thoughts into value. And it plays out a little bit like this tension between possibilities and pragmatics. There are 5 steps in the typical creative problem-solving process. You define the problem. You can't do what you haven't defined. You explore options, right? You choose the best option, hopefully. You execute, as in you do it, not as in you kill someone. And you rinse and repeat, because the best of the creatives in the marketplace understand this has to be part of the ethos of how they function. Now, I show you this to demonstrate how most of us actually approach the process when we're under pressure. There are actually 3 steps. We panic about the problem, we explore the first option that comes along, we choose that option, and we execute, right? We are great at executing. But in so doing, we short-circuit the process by which the best ideas can come. We don't venture out into the uncomfortable places. You see, the creative process is the perpetual assault on the beachhead of apathy. It's venturing out into uncomfortable places. And so as I was looking at those people in the marketplace who seem to be getting this prolific, brilliant, and healthy thing right, I started asking questions about how are they doing it. What I discovered is that most of them, even unknowingly, have built practices into their life to sustain them when things get crazy, because things always get crazy, right? And what I discovered is that they have a kind of rhythm in their life. And there are 5 common elements that I've identified of rhythm. The first is focus. And focus is all about how you define your work. It's about answering the question, what are we really trying to do here? What am I really trying to do here? And getting to the bottom of that and asking that question continually so that we know, our mind knows, the problem that we're really trying to solve. But there are some things we have to battle in order to focus effectively. A couple of years ago, my family and I made a trip to Lake Erie to see the fireworks. And we were heading down to the lake. We were putting the kids in the wagon. As we started heading down to the lake, our middle child started protesting vehemently. I mean, screaming bloody murder. I'm not going to go. Like a good dad, I said, shut up and get in the wagon, right? So we get him in the wagon, and we start heading down to the lake. And as we get closer and closer to the lake, he starts protesting. He jumps out of the wagon. He runs the other direction. And so I grab him by the shoulders and I say, Owen, son, it's okay. The fireworks aren't going to fall on you. They're not going to fall on you. He said, I'm not worried they're going to fall on me. Fireworks make my feet fuzzy. They make your feet fuzzy. First of all, I turned to my wife and said, what have you been feeding my child, right? But then I said, they make your feet fuzzy. What are you talking about? And he said, yeah, like at Disney World. And I suddenly remembered that the prior year we made a trip to Disney World as a family, and Owen spent most of the day riding around on my shoulders. And at one point, we walk in front of Cinderella's castle, and at the height of the show, there's this plume of fireworks that goes off. And in his fireworks-induced startle, Owen suddenly realized that while riding on my shoulders for 2 hours, his legs had fallen asleep. And in his 6-year-old mind, he developed a causal relationship between fireworks making his legs immobile, right? So we had a little talk about causality, correlation. I don't think he quite got it. But think about that. He had developed this false assumption and had fossilized around that assumption. Do you ever do that in your work? Because sometimes that prevents us from looking at potentially useful places and focusing in places that could help us find a good solution to our problem. The second source of tension related to focus is something I call the ping. And the ping is that perpetual pinprick in my gut that says, you should go check your email right now. You should go check your Twitter feed right now. You should go check your phone because maybe the President of the United States is calling you with a national security crisis, right? And it's this perpetual sense that something out there is more important than whatever is in front of me. And it creates this perpetual sense, as Linda Stone calls it, of continuous partial awareness. I'm always kind of here, but I'm always kind of somewhere else. And it prevents us from focusing deeply on our most important work. So we need to learn to tame the ping if we want to be effective. So focus is all about defining our work and answering the question, what am I really trying to do here? And continuing to ask that question until we get to the bottom of it on a daily basis, on an hourly basis if we have to make sure that we stay aligned. The second element of creative rhythm is relationships. There is a myth in our society of the lone innovator, that there's somebody in a cabin in South Georgia right now inventing the next iPad, and they're going to come out and say, ta-da! It doesn't happen. Innovation typically is the collective grasp for the next. And my findings are built on your findings. And as Stephen Johnson says, we pursue the adjacent possible together by getting more parts on the table. So one practice that we can build into our life to help us do that is to get a group of people together on a regular basis and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what are you working on? Number 2, what can we do to help you with that? And number 3, what's inspiring you? Powerful question to ask. What's inspiring you? And by doing this, we begin to get more parts on the table, and we have more things at our disposal when we're trying to solve problems. And people who are prolific, brilliant, and healthy get this. They have vibrant relationships in their life. The third element of rhythm is energy. And energy is all about how we manage our most valuable resource. We are wonderful at managing time. We're abysmal at managing energy. And so we stack meeting after meeting after meeting after obligation, and we have nothing left to give. In a vineyard, one of the primary roles of the vine keeper is to regularly prune areas of new growth off the vine. Perfectly good fruit. Why would they prune perfectly good fruit off the vine? Because the vine keeper knows that if that fruit isn't pruned, eventually the entire vine will begin to succumb to systemic mediocrity, because it will steal resources from the older, more mature fruit-bearing parts of the vine. As people who are creative, we don't struggle with new fruit. We don't struggle with new ideas. But we need to be good about pruning and creating space in our life for ideas to emerge in the gaps. The fourth element of rhythm is stimuli. And stimuli is all about what we put in our head. There's an old saying about food that you are what you eat. Well, the same thing applies to our creative process. We create what we take in, but many of us go through our days indiscriminately snacking on what would amount to creative junk food. So we spend all day watching YouTube and Jersey Shore. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Well, there kind of is. But anyway, right? And we snack on this all day long, but we're not filling our minds with things that nourish us, that challenge us to see the world in new ways, that cause us to have to commune with great minds, as Stephen Sample says. So one practice to build into your life is to have a study plan, right? A study plan. Identify the things you're curious about and begin to ask those questions and fill your life with resources that help you pursue those deeper curiosities, because that's where your mind wants to go anyway. So funnel resources into your world to help you pursue those curiosities that sharpen you, that challenge you to see the world in new ways. Be purposeful about your mental development, about the things you put in your head, because that is what comprises your creative process. The final element of rhythm is hours. And this is all about time. Time is the currency of productivity. At the end of the day, where we put our time determines our success or failure. But many of us default to what could be called an efficiency mindset with our time rather than an effectiveness mindset. So we'd rather spend an hour cranking through email than spending time working on our most important projects, trying to generate ideas. We need to be good about thinking in terms of effectiveness, not just efficiency with our time. One practice that I suggest to people is to have something in your world that I call unnecessary creating. And unnecessary creating is a practice where you build something into your life that allows you to develop skills, to try new things, to take risks in a relatively low-risk environment. And it's astounding to me how often I come into organizations and I look at a designer, I look at a writer, I look at a creative director, or I look at a manager and I say, when was the last time you made something that somebody wasn't paying you to make? And the answer is, I can't remember. I can't remember the last time I made something for myself. It's an incredibly inefficient way to spend your time. I've got deadlines, I've got things to do. Boss is breathing down my neck. But we need to create space in our life for brilliant ideas to emerge. So build unnecessary creating into your world. It's remarkably inefficient and incredibly effective. So it's kind of a brief flyover, but these 5 elements, focus, relationships, energy, stimuli, hours, building practices in each of these areas creates space. It provides an undergirding infrastructure for our creative process. And it positions us for those moments when we have to be brilliant at a moment's notice. So the dirty little secret is, if you want to be brilliant at a moment's notice, you need to begin far upstream from the moment you need a brilliant idea. So this gets us to a deeper question. Why? Okay. Why do this? Why build practices? Just so we can crank out a little more work? Just so we can reply to emails a little faster? Maybe climb the corporate ladder? And I would submit to you that many of us never pursue the deeper questions about why we're here on this earth. The deeper question about how we should be spending our life. And the reason is that we're under pressure, we're under the gun so much that we don't feel that kind of space in our life to pursue those questions. I think a better way to ask this is to ask something like this. Why should anybody care if you disappear into a giant sinkhole in the earth? I mean, your family's going to cry a little bit, right? But I mean, really, what space do you occupy on this earth? And have you really thought about that? And are you building practices into your life to help you explore it? One of my favorite thinkers was a 20th century mystic and monk named Thomas Merton. And I think he nailed this create on demand dynamic when he said this. There can be an intense egoism in following everyone else. People are in a hurry to magnify themselves by imitating what is popular and too lazy to think of anything better. Hurry ruins saints as well as artists. They want quick success, and they are in such a hurry to get it, they cannot take time to be true to themselves. And when the madness is upon them, they argue that their very haste is a species of integrity. We live in a marketplace where everyone is chasing everyone else. Everyone is trying to be the next. What's the next? What was the first question that people asked when Steve Jobs died? Who's the next Steve Jobs? I think that's a profoundly disinteresting question, right? Who cares about the next? I want to be the first. I want to occupy space. But in order to do that, I have to begin to build some practices that give me the capacity to explore my deeper aptitudes. That's why since the beginning of our company, we've had a saying, cover bands don't change the world. And a cover band is a band that plays other people's music. And you know what? Cover bands fill clubs. Cover bands even make a lot of money. But at the end of the night, people go home singing the music, not talking about the band. They remember the music. And we each need to develop the capacity to find our unique voice, our unique music. So I'll leave you with one final thought. Several years ago, a friend of mine from South Africa was leading a meeting, and he asked kind of an out-of-the-blue question. He said, what do you think the most valuable land in the world is? And we're all thinking, that's a weird question. I don't know, like the oil fields of the Middle East, diamond mines of South Africa, Manhattan. He's like, no. You're all wrong. The most valuable land in the world is the graveyard. Because in the graveyard are buried all of the unwritten novels, all of the unlaunched businesses, all of the unreconciled relationships where people said, I'll get around to that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. And one day their tomorrows ran out. And so that day, I went home and I wrote 2 words, and I put those words on my wall, and I've kept those words in my notebook ever since. And those 2 words are die empty. Because at the end of the day today, I want to know that I have done everything in my power to empty myself of whatever is in me today, not tomorrow's work, but today's work. So I can lay my head down satisfied that I have done today's work because I have built practices. I've created space in my life to think about why I'm here, not just what I have to do, but why I'm doing what I do on a daily basis. So friends, I want to challenge you that each of us have a creative mandate. We have a mandate upon us in the context of the society we live in the context of the workplace, the marketplace, to bring ourselves fully to what we do. So build practices around your creative process. Treat your life with purpose, with structure, so that someday, when your days run out, you can say, I died empty. Thank you very much.